questions. At this point, the committee secretary shall acknowledge our guests and resource persons attending today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I acknowledge the presence of the following resource persons. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Deputy Governor for Monetary and Economic Sector, Mr. Francisco G. Daquila Jr., and Attorney Leila Magda G. Rivera, Managing Director, Controllership, Subsector, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Deputy General Counsel, Office of the General Counsel and Legal Services of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Attorney Asma A. Panda. Their technical support team, Ms. Mary Ann L. Cube, Ms. Charity S. Malto, Attorney Maria Cristina E. Villaroya Moreno, Attorney Katrina Ann Libonhay Aldon, and Ms. Sara Amabel Emilia. From the DOF, we have Assistant Secretary Eufrosino M. Bernabe Jr., Office of the Chief Economist, Mr. Duke Katoko from Office of the Chief Economist of DOF, Ms. Eileen Elijen Saez, Office of the Chief Economist, DOF, Ms. Sara Conche, Ms. Klein Avellino, and Mr. Mike Saulo. From the Land Bank of the Philippines, President, Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Cecilia C. Borromeo, Senior Vice President, Mr. Elcid C. Pangilinan, Senior Vice President, Mr. Gonzalo Benjamin A. Bongolan. From the NEDA, we have Ms. Irene Cuya and Undersecretary Crystal Tan Uy. From the Development Bank of the Philippines, President and CEO, Mr. Michael O. De Jesus, together with Mr. Rodrigo Jesus V. Mantaring, Vice President, Ms. Maria Luisa Aguirre Pangilinan, Senior Assistant Vice President. From the Bureau of Treasury, we have our National Treasurer, Ms. Rosalia V. De Leon, together with Deputy Treasurer Eduardo Anthony Marino, Director Kenneth Ian Francisco, and Mr. Lance Lim. From the Department of Budget and Management, we have Undersecretary Leo Angelo M. Larsha and Undersecretary Joselito Basilio. Attorney Christine P. Altares, Ms. Alondra Shaira Cerdeña, Ms. Ariel Fajardo, Mr. Christian Andal, Mr. Alexis Red Luis Iraga, Deputy Executive Director Maria Dionisha Guillermo, and virtually attending Attorney Vixon Mabanglo. From the Governance Commission for Government-Owned or Controlled Corporations, GCG, we have the Chairperson, Justice Alex L. Quiros, together with Commissioner Attorney Gideon D.V. Mortel, Jason L. Cecilio, Attorney Ruth Galil R. Miasco, Attorney Juliet Marie M. Guevara, Ina Marie Feliz C. Protasio Ladislao, Delia Tabionag, Jennifer B. Copag, Hernani S. De la Cruz, and Ramonchita G. Laranio. From the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel, we have our Government Corporate Counsel, Attorney Rogelio Quevedo. Together with him are Melissa Montesilio Acorda, Bernadette Faustine Balao, Alika Tinao, Princess Fatima Parahiman. From the NEDA, we also have Undersecretary Rosemary Edelion. From the Commission on Audit, virtually attending are Ms. Adela L. Dondonilla, Attorney Fabian K. De Los Santos III, Ms. Marie Frances Hazel S. Acevedo, and Ms. Singson. From the Securities and Exchange Commission, we have Attorney Ferdino Logi Santiago. From the Office of the General Counsel. From the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, PAGCOR, we have Assistant Vice President Attorney Arnold Ferdinand Salvosa, Senior Manager Mr. Jesus Israel Javier. Supporting him are Miss Maria Laarni Orbeta and Mr. Darren Agaton. From the Public-Private Partnership Center, we have Executive Director Miss Maria Cynthia C. Hernandez and Jeffrey Mando. From the Government Procurement Policy Board, DSO, we have Ariel E. de Los Angeles. From the private sector, Your Honor, we have Mr. Antonio C. Moncupa Jr., President of the Bankers Association of the Philippines. Together with him is his Managing Director, Mr. Benjamin P. Castillo. From the Federation of Economic Freedom, we have their President, Mr. Calixto Chiquiamco. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please allow us to state specific House rules to ensure the orderly and efficient conduct of this morning's hearing. The committee secretary shall inform today's attendees of our House rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kindly mute your microphone if you are not recognized or do not wish to be recognized. Since the visual of the online meeting are limited, please inform the chairperson of your inquiry by specifying your name before stating your concern, comment, or position. All data that the resource persons wish to present relative to the subject today may be submitted to the committee secretariat for consideration of this body. One representative per office or organization may be allowed to speak for their respective organizations.
Let me thank you for attending this committee hearing and assisting us in understanding the topics to be discussed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is our second hearing concerning the Maharlika Investment Fund bills. House Bill number 6608, an act establishing the Maharlika Investment Fund, providing for the management, investment, and use of the proceeds of the fund and appropriating funds thereof by Representatives from Romualdez, Delipe, Kimbo, et al. And Senate Bill number 1670, an act establishing the Maharlika Investment Fund, providing for the management, investment, and use of the proceeds of the fund and for other purposes by Senator Mark Villar. We had our first public hearing last February 1, 2023. We will likewise add to our agenda Senate Bill number 1814, an act establishing the Maharlika Investment Fund, providing for the management, investment, and use of the proceeds of the fund and for other purposes by Senator Raffy Tulfo. Senate Bill number 1814 was referred to the committee last February 1, 2023 during the 3 p.m. session and after we suspended our first public hearing at 1:39 p.m. During our last meeting, we discussed the objective, purpose, necessity, and benefits of the Maharlika bills, as well as the management of the funds. I thank my colleagues for their diligent study and effort to enhance the bill by raising highly relevant and important questions, leaving the committee an opportunity to further refine the language of the bill. As of today, our resource speakers during the first public hearing have already submitted their respective position papers, electronic copies of which were sent to the senators. The committee also received data information and documents from the agencies as well as requested by our colleagues last hearing, electronic copies of which were also sent to the senators. We also clarified some points during the first hearing. It was made clear to us that the purpose of the MIF is to widen the options available to the government. It will complement the usual modes of funding for infrastructure projects. Another is that the amount to be invested by the LBP and DBP is part of their investable funds. Thus, the contribution of the LBP and DBP are the amount meant for the investment. All the investments of the bank, be it in equity or loans, are subject to due diligence. The Philippines may benefit from having its own sovereign wealth fund, especially with respect to boosting our long-term economic productivity. Having a sovereign wealth fund may also help advance our infrastructure development. In this second hearing, we will continue with our public discourse. We invited resource persons from the private sector who are willing and ready to share their expertise on the matter. Senator Ontiveros requested through a motion last hearing to invite the Federation for Economic Freedom, Management Association of the Philippines, and the University of the Philippines School of Economics Alumni Association. Also invited today are the Ibon Foundation, and the Freedom from Debt Coalition. To our honored resource persons, we would like to hear your presentation and your take on the matter before we open the floor for questions and clarifications. So before we proceed, may I ask other senators present if they have any opening statement?
No,
proceed.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any statement to make, but I have some few questions later.
Thank you. We now proceed with the discussion. Again, in the interest of time and with the permission of my colleagues, we shall finish the presentation first. We shall endeavor to finish the presentation first before we ask our questions or seek clarifications. So at this point, we would like to request our resource persons to deliver the presentation on the subject matter, which should not exceed 10 minutes. I was informed by the committee secretary that there will be one presentation from the group of the Federation for Economic Freedom, Management Association of the Philippines, and the University of the Philippines School of Economics Alumni Association, which will be presented by Mr. Calixto Chiquiamco. We will now give our colleagues, at this point, we'd like to recognize the resource persons' presentations. So what's the first? So yes, Mr. Chiquiamco, you're recognized.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I would like to manifest that one of our fellows, former Deputy Governor Diwa Gunagundo, has sent a letter to the committee in which we will be distributing. He's in London right now, so he cannot join us, but he's sending a letter to the committee. So maybe we will make a presentation on the HBN 6088 and SBN 1670. May I go to this is our presentation outline. The funding source is problematic. 2, the confusion of objectives. 3, the question of level playing field in the summary and conclusion. So first of all, we go to the funding source is problematic. The capital contribution of Land Bank is about 25% of its capital and 33% of DBP. So it's a single, malaki po ang exposure ng DBP at Land Bank to a single investment, and I think it might even be breaching the prudential regulations on a single investment. No. Next. Next. Well, hindi po malinaw doon sa bill ang investment ng Land Bank at DBP guaranteed po ng national government, no? Because Section 11 talks about security or debt instruments issued by the MIC shall be guaranteed by the national government. So equity sa security, hindi po malinaw kung guaranteed yon o hindi. Kung guaranteed po yon, can we move to the next slide? Kung guaranteed po yun, ito po ang issues. Ano po yung guaranteed, no? Well, the one before that. Can I have the slide before that? What is guaranteed? Yung principal po ba, yung income? Sa securities po, walang malinaw na may such thing as a guaranteed equity. No? So susunod. So, will other shareholders be disadvantaged versus DBP and Land Bank? Will the non-GFI debt holders be junior in security to the equity holder? Again, hindi po malinaw yun sa bill, no? So susunod. The slide. So assuming it's guaranteed, this creates a giant moral hazard. Ano po ibig sabihin ng giant moral hazard? When parties are protected from the consequences of their decisions. Moral hazard creates incentive for the parties to be reckless, no? Kasi nga, they will not reap the consequences of their decisions. Land Bank, DBP will not do any more due diligence kasi guaranteed po ito ng national government. Merong consequences po, next slide, ang pagka-moral hazard. Yung ating 1997 financial crisis was when companies assumed central banks will protect the exchange rate and therefore borrowed heavily in dollars. Noong 2008, yung US financial crisis, ay nangyari po when big banks assumed they were too big to fail, na save sila ng gobyerno and therefore they can take necessary risks. Susunod po. Sunod na slide. Susunod na slide. So, wait. If it is not guaranteed, it increases systemic risk to the banking system. The valuation of the value of the MIF will translate to losses to the DBP and Land Bank. So, maaari ito magkasunog sa buong financial system sapagkat exposed po ang DBP, ang Land Bank sa MIF, no? So, pag bumaba po ang value ng MIF, ma-erode yung capital ng DBP Land Bank at maaari mag-spread po yan, contagion to the rest of the banking system. Lalo na po ito the banking system and therefore they're subjected to all sorts of financial crisis and financial panic, no? Next. Other issues, malaki pong opportunity cost to the Land Bank and DBP sapagkat the money that could have gone, for example, to the farmers' loans by the Land Bank, mapupunta po sa Maharlika Investment Fund. Pangalawa, yung regulatory relief to the GFIs will erode the moral standing of the BSP. Hindi na, ang BSP mawawala ng moral standing to impose very strict regulations to the private banking system when they allow regulations to be loose and to be breached by the Land Bank and DBP. Susunod po. The SBS exempted degrades BSP as an institution. Una, it delays the increased capitalization of the BSP. The BSP's balance sheet, in fact, has been deteriorating, has been weakening from a net worth of 145 billion in 2019 to about 85 billion in October 2022. That's the latest figures that we're able to get. We need a strong BSP in an era of economic and geopolitical uncertainty. Hindi po natin alam, maaari magkaroon po na naman ng gera between NATO and Russia, magka-invade sa Taiwan. A number of geopolitical uncertainties loom over the horizon and kailangan po malakas ang ating Bangko Sentral and therefore it needs the capital. Pangalawa, can we move to the next slide? It undermines BSP as an institution to maintain price and financial system stability. Sapagkat ang income objectives po ang magdodominate ang BSP policy making because they'll be under pressure to make income, net income that will be declared as dividends to the MIF perpetually, no? However, the BSP sometimes loses money from trading operations, such as protecting the peso from appreciation too much. Nangyari po ito noong 2012 nung nalugi po ang BSP trying to protect the peso from breaching 50 to 1. I think mga 70 billion na wala sa kanila noon. Borrowing to sterilize excess liquidity, reducing reserve requirements, etc. But it may desist from these operations as it pursues higher net incomes to be declared as dividends. So susunod po. Isa po, the NG guarantee of MIF debt from GFIs will produce enormous fiscal and other risks. It will increase NG's, the national government's contingent liability. Wala pong limit sa pag-i-issue ng debt ng mga land bank at DP, mga GFIs at papautangin ang MIF with a national government guarantee. It may lead to this in fact may lead to a ratings downgrade, increase the cost of borrowings for the government. So instead of increasing the funds available to government, ang mangyari yung kabaligtaran, which is it may lead to increased borrowing costs for the government. And instead of increased funds for governments, increased borrowing costs will widen the fiscal deficit. Next. The MIF will likely produce intergenerational debt rather than intergenerational wealth. Next. Meron po rin confusion of objectives. Kailangan ho natin malaman, will the MIF seek developmental or optimized returns? Will it take welfare into consideration when investing? Just seek to optimize returns as an investment fund. For example po, will it seek the highest possible toll rate to maximize return to the fund? Or does it seek to get the lowest possible toll for the benefit of toll users and commuters? Hindi po malinaw yan sa bill ano ang magiging primary objective noong MIF, no? So magkakaroon po nitong conflicting objectives dito. Next. Meron pong question ng level playing field. The MIF will have all sorts of tax-free privileges. Will there be a level playing field in the competition for projects? Also, as a government institution, it holds privileged information. So won't it have unfair advantages over the others sa competition po ng projects? If foreigners co-invest, will they also be privileged with information to the detriment of other competitors in the private sector, say in PPP projects? So dapat merong level playing field, no? Next. Next. An uneven playing field will dampen rather than improve the investment climate. So instead of marami pong investments ang papasok, mas maaring ma-deter po yung mga legitimate investors pag nakikita nila na hindi po level yung playing field. Next. Ito po ang summary and conclusion. We do not object to the creation of a development financial institution. Sa palagay po namin, maaring kailangan nga to, kamukha nung ginawa ng National Development Corporation, sila po ang responsible for our banana and pineapple industries, no? Maaring kailangan rin ng isang development financial institution, for example, in consolidating farmlands, putting up industrial tree plantations and other kinds of projects. Ngunit, the BSP and GFI should be removed as funding sources. Pangalawa, the primary objective of the MIF should be clarified. Conflicts of interest should not arise. And pangatlo and last, the level playing field should not be tilted in favor of the MIF. Yun po lang. Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. And I'd like to recognize, of course, Senator Pimentel, Senator Coco Pimentel. And online, we have Senator Nancy Binay. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to help those online, kasi online ako when
Yes, sir.
I was coming here.
Yeah.
We could barely hear the proceedings. So can
Please,
can
can
our
the-
tech people?
Yes, can the secretary please resolve? Can you check this, please, and see if we can resolve these issues on the volume? So at this point, I just have a few questions, and of course, we will open the floor to our other colleagues. I just have some with regards to your conclusions, and I think you make some very valid points, sir. So assuming you were suggesting the BSP and GFI should be removed as fund sources, so are you suggesting that it could be completely private from private sources, that the government should not put in any capital in this Maharlika, or what are your suggestions, sir? I also like to hear your suggestions.
Well, I think there might be other sources of funds for the government that which could initially fund it. For example, privatization proceeds for say yung munting lupa property ng Bucor, I think, the Naiya tree, even privatization of Pagcor. I mean, marami po na sources that the government can tap to initially fund it, and at the same time attract investments from the private sector and even from foreign sources eventually. In fact, magkakaroon po pa ng problema ng absorptive capacity, I think, in the first 2 to 3 years. Kasi mag-ramp up pa yan, matagal pa, no? To build up its organization, etc. So it has time to raise the funds.
Thank you very much. And there were some issues. Maybe we can ask the economic team also to comment. Perhaps when you mentioned earlier on the opportunity cost, which for the funds might be diverted from loans from our farming sector. Maybe the land bank can comment on that.
Thank you, Senator Villar, and good morning to all the honorable senators. The 50 billion being contemplated as the contribution of the land bank to the Maharlika investment funds will be part of the investable funds of the bank, meaning our investable funds is net of the loans that we give to our customers, including the players in the agribusiness value chain and the small farmers, sir. So right now, our loan investable funds amount to 1.3 trillion pesos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And perhaps there was also something comment made on the BSP, the balance sheet deterioration. Perhaps the BSP can also comment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Your Honors. Now, we note that in both the House and Senate bills, the BSP's declared dividends to the national government is one of the funding sources of the Maharlika Investment Fund. And it can also be noted that under RA 7653, BSP is already mandated to remit a portion of its dividends to the national government. So that essentially, the dividends belong to the national government. And we recognize that Congress maintains the supreme power of the purse and has inherent authority to appropriate any dividends accruing to the national government in a manner that it deems appropriate to support the government's economic goals. Now, because of that, actually, the fact that the dividends belong to the national government means that it should not affect the BSP's independence and its capacity to deliver on its mandates of promoting price stability, a strong financial system, and a safe and efficient payment system. On the comment on the BSP being constrained on its ability to deliver its mandate because of it would be maximizing profits instead in order to increase its dividend contribution. Actually, there is no change in the mandate of the BSP being imposed by the version of the bill. So again, we do not see these provisions as impinging on the BSP's ability to achieve its mandate. The impact on of the provisions would be a slight delay in the completion of the BSP's capitalization build-up. Nevertheless, the BSP's balance sheet has improved and is strong, and a slight delay in the completion of our capitalization is uh, is not really it will not really hurt. Now, some numbers were cited in the PowerPoint that the net worth of the BSP has gone down from, I think the figure cited was from 2019 from 145 billion pesos to October of 2022 of 85.35 billion. Actually, when we look at the drivers behind the change, I look at the liability side of the balance sheet. In 2019, currency issued was about 1.679 trillion pesos. And it jumped to 2.04 trillion in 2020. That's a direct result of the pandemic because of the increased preference for cash. And then it's more or less maintained, so that by October of 2022, currency issuance was at 2.084 trillion pesos. That's a jump in the currency issuance. Currency is treated as a liability of the BSP, but it's not really a liability that anyone is going to call. I mean, it's not an indebtedness that you'll have to pay back. So, well, that increase alone is enough to account for the decline in the net worth. Again, the other major change in the balance sheet, I'm looking at the liabilities portion of the balance sheet. Deposits of the Bureau of the Treasury went up from 159.9 billion pesos in 2019 to 1.282 trillion pesos as of October of 2022. And these are the proceeds from borrowings of the national government. So should the national government begin to withdraw these borrowings, then there would be an equivalent decline in our international reserves. But then that's a one-for-one change in both the assets and the liabilities. So again, it will not be something that will impact on the net worth. So I think those trends explain the change in the net worth, and it doesn't really mean that the BSP has become weaker as an institution or less able to do the necessary operations to be able to achieve its mandate. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you. The Deputy Governor Francisco Daquila Jr. from the BSP. And earlier, prior to him, we heard from our Land Bank President, Ma'am Cecilia Borromeo. Just a few more questions, and then we'll proceed with the order. The order after this will be Senator Gatchalian, followed by Senator Tulfo, followed by Senator Binay, and Senator Pimentel. Regarding your point regarding the moral hazard was well taken. You understand. I mean, obviously the concept is it's a well, just for the viewers, it's an economic concept wherein if there is a guarantee, then it gives the institution I guess it creates a situation where there's very little downside to making risky investments. That's basically the concept of moral hazard, which was something that came up during the bailouts done in 2008. So that was, I see your point is well taken, and I understand you are not, of course, the guarantees. Now, when you say you're against the guarantees, do you mean, for instance, I think this is something that should be clarified. Is it the guarantee? Would you be there? Because there are some groups who would like the investment, not necessarily the returns, but at the very least the principal of of the government GFI's investment in the Maharlika to be guaranteed. Is that even that your group is opposed to that?
Yes, we're opposed to the guarantee even of the principal because again, uh, again, it's part of the moral hazard. I mean, it will not. That means that they could just not do any due diligence with respect to the investment. No, and of course, it increases the contingent liability of the government.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And I think that's something even well to begin with. I think in the issuance of debt, it wasn't intended in the spirit of the bill to be part of the guarantee, but it's more like the amount that it was what we were the bill conceptualized was more of the amount invested by the principal invested by the GFI would be guaranteed by the government. So I mean that's something I think that's it's good to that we discuss that issue. I think moral hazard is a very legitimate concept. So thank you very much for that clarification, and uh, and also the tax benefits. There's a provision there where in lieu of taxes there would be a percentage of the fund to be given to certain certain public service projects. Uh, so you would rather that? Are you saying you would rather that there just be it not be the fund will not be exempt from any taxes, the usual? That's your position.
Well, we're just arguing that it has that it should have the playing field should be level because right now I think under the bill it is exempt from all taxes. No, therefore, how therefore it will have an unfair advantage over other uh, companies that will say bid for if it's a PPP or infrastructure projects. No, so that's the problem. That's the major problem that there will be a uneven playing field. It's not so much as where the money will go, the dividends, no, but as to in the competition for projects, the playing field might be uneven.
So I would because the original concept was was the that allocation of that income allocation was in lieu of taxes. They would give it to I know, but I think as you're saying that are you more of the I guess are you more of the line of thinking that it should be just direct taxes? We don't have to allocate a portion of the income. Instead of that, let's just make it fair. I mean, in that respect because originally the concept was that was done in lieu of the taxes that were supposed to be paid. They would give it directly to these social civic projects. So, I mean, based on your statement, can I derive from that that you're more of the mindset that they should just pay directly taxes instead of going and having that?
Yes, I think they should pay taxes the same as other private corporations if they're going to compete with the private sector for projects.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And thank you for the effort. This is the private sector. They did representing the several organizations who have created this single presentation for their comments on the Maharlika bill, and I thank you for that. At this point, I'd like to the committee would like to recognize Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Um, my first question is to Mr. Chichamco of FEF. Sir, I was looking at your presentation and I was also listening earlier. Um, And obviously, there's some concern on how the Maharlika Investment Fund will be structured, and will be created. But a lot of this actually can be remedied through law. We can correct that as we discuss the bill and as we modify the bill. Like, for example, the guarantees, assuming I think during the last hearing, no, and, it was also mentioned that there is indeed a guarantee to the DBP and Land Bank. Their infusion, their capital infusion will be guaranteed. That was discussed during the last hearing. But we can remove that through law. No? So we can take that out. In terms of competitiveness, we can also remove by law the tax breaks and the tax exemptions given to the Maharlika Investment Fund. That should even out the playing field. No? If we remove all of those and make it a standalone fund, just like any other fund, no, an ETF or a mutual fund that will compete for investments, that will report through profits or through income, um, not clouded with tax incentives. Will this be palatable to the private sector and to the uh, to experts like yourselves?
Well, if you remove the guarantee to the investment of DBP and Land Bank, on the other hand, it will increase the systemic risks to the banking system, as any failure or even market volatility of the fund will translate to charges in the capital of DBP and Land Bank. It will become wobbly, and the market will perceive that, and it can create contagion and financial panic.
Okay, so in your opinion, the capital infusion from the GFI might lead to I think you call it lighting the fire in the banking industry.
Yes.
Assuming we find other sources, because the chairman also requested that the DOF to submit to us some assets that can be sold in the next few months, and the proceeds from the assets can be infused to this. Assuming, no, we manage to find other sources. Will this be palatable?
Yes, as long as you remove the GFIs from the funding. As I said, we also see a need for a development financial institution, similar to, for example, what the National Development Corporation has done before, because it leased lands to the pineapple and banana industries, and that's the reason why we have the banana and pineapple industries. There could be, for example, in consolidating farmlands, we need bigger and better managed farms now. So, I mean, there's a role for a development financial institution to do this, or in renewable energy projects. In fact, our vice chairman, Romy Bernardo, suggested in an article to create a Maharlika Green Investment Fund, in which international investors will very likely co-invest, because this will be lead to mitigation of climate change. So as long as the funding will not increase the systemic risks to the banking system, I think we can live with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chikyamko. I'll go to the land bank, no, and I want to understand the um, the source of the 50 billion. No, I understand that you mentioned, Ma'am Borromeo, that there is 1.5 trillion in investable funds. Is that correct?
Through the chairman, yes, Senator Gatchalian, the investment portfolio of Land Bank is 1.3 trillion. That is net of the loans that we've given to our priority sectors, including the agri sector.
But ang laki ho, no? I'm not happy to hear that there's this much funds in a bank, no? Considering that the GFIs are geared towards a specific mandate. No? Land Bank for agriculture, DBP for developmental projects. They're not commercial banks that the board has a discretion to leave X amount. These banks were created for a specific reason. No? Number for Land Bank is agriculture. So I'm actually not impressed to hear no, that there is 1.5 trillion lying around not being lent to our agriculture sector. We all know that agriculture sector needs investment. What Mr. Chichamco mentioned earlier, consolidating land, lending out to farmers, modernizing needs a lot of capital. Bakit ang laki ho? How come there's 1.3 trillion lying around and not being plowed into to the agriculture sector?
There are several factors that can explain the balance sheet po of Land Bank. First, the asset size of Land Bank is mainly driven by deposits, most of which are short term. So we manage those funds in a manner where we allocate a portion of it for long-term loans and also for working capital requirements of eligible borrowers, sir. But the loans that we don't lend yet because there is also an issue about the absorptive capacity of some of the sectors that we prioritize, like the agri sector. We park those funds in government bonds and treasury bills. Most of our investments, probably 95% of our investments are in government bonds and treasury bills, Senator. So while we are also working very hard on increasing the absorptive capacity of the agri sector, the reality, sir, is that there are so many challenges, and most of the players in the agribusiness value chain are actually not yet ready to be funded via credit. And that is why we see the Department of Agriculture also giving subsidies to this sector. But let me just assure the senators and the public that the loan portfolio of Land Bank to the agri sector has been increasing more rapidly than the growth of the agri sector, sir. Our loan portfolio to the agri sector as of end of 2022 was 261 billion, sir, the highest probably in the industry.
So this will be sourced from the park funds, no? Funds that are yet seeking loanable entities. How big is that park fund? That's the 1.3 trillion. Tama po ba?
Yes, sir, that's our investment portfolio.
What is the composition of your investment portfolio?
95% of those investments are in government treasury bills
Okay.
and bonds.
And the 5%?
That would be in some equities.
In the stock market?
Yes, sir.
All of that?
No, it's a combination of also private issued bonds.
The 5% is how much?
That's about 600 billion.
600?
No. 60 billion.
5% of 1.3?
60 billion, sir.
60 billion. Okay. And the 50 billion that will be invested in the Maharlika Investment Fund, where will that come from? The 95 or the 5%?
It can be a combination, sir. As the investments will mature at the time that we will be mandated to give our 50 billion contribution to the fund, or we can also fund it via additional deposits. So we won't have to be pressured to sell our existing portfolio.
This 60 billion, what is the ratio between equities in the stock market and private companies? I would assume the equities in the stock market is bigger because of liquidity. Correct? You can sell it anytime.
Our ceiling for equities is 50 billion, but we are not invested up to that ceiling, Senator. Let me just check.
I just want to know how you manage your funds. No? So I just want to be enlightened how Land Bank manages 1.3 trillion in investable funds or park, we call it park funds. No? So just want to understand that. So that 60 billion, which is the 5%, how is that? What is the breakdown of that?
That we will have to check.
Over 60.
In equities.
Yeah, 30.
Okay. It's told by our senior vice president. Actually, we have about 20 billion or 16 billion in private equities.
60 billion in private equity.
16 billion in
16,
private
okay.
equities. The others are the bonds issued by the private sector also, mostly the conglomerates. So when we manage our investable funds, Senator, we look at the maturities to ensure liquidity. When our depositors would like to get back their money, we ensure that we can service those withdrawals. So it's a balance of the maturities of our various investments and also optimization of the returns on our investments. Thank you.
Understand that, ma'am. This in equity, are these invested in blue chip companies? What is the investment criteria?
Yes, we do have criteria on our investment. So we look at their ratings done by either the domestic rating companies or even the international rating companies. We conduct due diligence, a very thorough due diligence on the financials and even on the management of these companies. These are publicly listed, of course, and as you mentioned, probably all of them are blue chip, considered blue chip companies.
From the ratio, no, this is my my personal take on this. From the ratio, Land Bank is a super risk averse institution. No? 95% in government bonds and T-bills. That's virtually risk-free, no? Guaranteed by the state. 5% in equities, and the criteria is they should be blue chip companies, I would assume, correct? And earlier, I heard that the 50 billion, aside from the concern of Mr. Chiquiamco on the financial contagion possibility, no. I heard earlier that the 50 billion will be taken out either from government equities, the 95%, or the 5%, no? Or a combination. No? If we remove, assuming the guarantee to Land Bank, no? And because that's also a concern of some of the legislators, it's my personal concern as well. If we remove that, how will you rate the Maharlika Investment Fund? Because 95% risk-free, 5% blue chip. Maharlika Investment Fund is a new fund. We take out the guarantee, no, so that it will compete just like any other mutual fund or ETF. How will you rate them?
The investment in the fund, Maharlika Investment Fund, will be an investment to an allied undertaking. And based on the BSP regulations, that will carry a 100% charge on our capital, meaning that investment will have to be deducted from our capital when we compute for our capital adequacy ratio, Senator.
You need a higher capital adequacy ratio for this investment. No, let's take it one step lang. First, how do you rate it? Do you rate it as a class A investment, class B investment? No. Kasi ngayon wala kayong choice because it's in the law. No?
Yes.
So you don't rate it at all. That's where the moral hazards actually come in. No? You don't look at the ratings anymore because whether you like it or not, you have to plow in the 50 billion. That's where the FEF moral hazard comes in. No?
Because
but
there's-
independently, how do you analyze this new fund? No?
Uh, we will have to look at the business plan of the corporation where the funds will be invested because that's the way we do our due diligence.
have you seen the business plan
Of the corporation for not
of
yet, sir.
Maharlika Investment Fund?
No, none.
So you haven't seen the business
And
plan.
so we don't have any rating and the investment because of lack of historical information.
With the permission of Senator Gatchalian. Kasi he mentioned yung business plan. Is there a business plan? Yeah, wala si land bank, but may
National Treasurer, ma'am, baka you can speak for the group, for the economic team.
Mr. Chair, eventually, well, of course, right now we're working on the legislation. Part of the legislation is that there would be an investment strategy and also a risk management strategy. But all the projects that would be funded by the Maharlika Fund would be approved by the NEDA. So NEDA has already a pipeline of all these projects that could be financed by the Maharlika.
Hindi, pero Secretary De Leon, di ba para mas, ano ba yan, mas mako-convince kami to approve this bill kung alam na rin namin kung ano ba talaga yung business plan?
Well, ma'am, in the legislation po, we have also cited already the objectives, which is the developmental and of course the commercial. And then we are also working in terms of how much would be the returns that are also envisioned by the fund.
Yeah,
So-
pero how can you envision a return when you don't even know what's the specific developmental plan? Like, offhand, can you cite one developmental project na mukhang yun na yung first, first target nyo?
Senator, just for the information, I mean, before the committee members, we asked from the Department of Finance a specific list of projects that could potentially be part of the assets of the Maharlika Fund, big ticket projects, which we can furnish you. We have the copy here. So just for your information, Senator, of course, I understand that, of course, until the actual fund, the management team is formed, the details would be, work to follow. But we do have, if you want to see, Senator, we can furnish you a copy of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Gatchalian.
Yeah, that's another thing. No, I think it will give us a lot of comfort if we see where the fund will be invested. That's where the business plan is, and pursuing the questions to Ma'am Borromeo, I'm trying to address the moral hazards. No, kasi right now no choice so ang land bank. No, parang you're mandated to put money there. No, but if I look at your the attitude of your board or the attitude of the bank towards investment is very risk averse. 95% in T-bills. No? Kung ako, I won't do that, no? In my personal activity because it's so risk averse. No? But that's a bank. No? That's the nature of the bank. And I will not debate with you on that because you have to protect the deposits of the LGUs, the farmers, the corporations. That's the attitude towards investment. In the 5%, which is considered slightly risky, blue chip companies pa. No? So meaning the risk is minimized. No? So that's why I want to understand if land bank will not be mandated to invest here, what type of analysis will you do so that you'll be convinced that you'll be convinced to invest in Maharlika? You look at the business plan, but there's no business plan. What else will you look at?
The objectives of the Maharlika Investment Corporation will guide the bank Senator. And of course, Land Bank is the biggest policy bank. So whatever is the national socio-economic agenda of the government, we will support, sir. Because also most of our deposits, about 65% of our deposits are from government entities.
Valenzuela is also included. We're also a depositor of Land Bank, but I want to see our deposits come back intact. No?
Yeah.
So that I want to also understand that you're investing wisely in
Yes,
all
sir.
investments, not
Yes, sir.
only in Maharlika Investment Bank, but to all. No, that's why I want to understand how do you evaluate investments, and that's where I'm driving at. Because from where I stand right now, there's no details on how the fund will be invested in. Um, if this is peddled to Land Bank, will you invest? Kung wala po ito sa batas, will Land Bank find this a wise investment?
Uh, if it,
Because again, we're putting this again going by the presentation of FEF. We want to make this. We want to even the playing field, correct? So marami pong lalapit sa Land Bank na portfolio, mutual funds, no, other funds. You'll be evaluating them. Maharlika will be one. Will this be an attractive investment for Land Bank, considering that Land Bank is risk averse?
given all the objectives of the fund, which is for developmental projects, we can allocate our part of our capital. Total paid up now is 168 billion instead of the short-term deposits to fund our investment in the fund. The answer, sir, to your question, will we invest? Yes, if it is part of the socio-economic agenda of the national government.
But if it's not part of the socio-economic agenda, as a standalone investment fund, will you invest?
Uh,
No, that's what diba? I mean, you're managing the money, the deposits of other investors, no? So
Yeah. So since there's no historical data that we can base our decision whether to invest or not, the business plan of the corporation when formed or organized will be our basis for investing. And sir, our return on equity, the return on equity of the government in Land Bank was 14% last year. So if we were to use that metric, we will have to see a projected return on our own equity in the MIC through the MIF to be also along that range, sir, about 14%.
Yes, thank you. Can I just interject just a clarification about the question of Senator Senator Binay earlier? Yes, the document that we have is actually for disposal, government assets for disposal, which was requested in the last committee, not possible PPP. So later on, after the line, maybe later on, the PPP center is here and they can give information to Senator Binay about what potential projects are there for the Maharlika should it be implemented. Also, along these lines, also I think it should be noted also that in the law, the Land Bank and DBP are members of the board, so they do have a say on what the investments, along with the Department of Finance Secretary. So, in terms of what will be invested in, these initial investors, Land Bank will have a say on what the Maharlika fund will be invested in. Just thank you.
Mr. Chair, my point of the matter there is the Land Bank is a bank, no? They have the park funds that Ms. Borromeo mentioned earlier are deposits from LGUs, deposits from the employees, deposits from agri-related companies, and these park funds are meant to be safeguarded by making wise investments. No, of course, we understand that the Land Bank is supportive of the developmental policies of government, but these are not excess funds. These are park funds because they're not loaned to loanable companies. No, so my point there is the Maharlika Investment Fund should be evaluated just like any other mutual funds, portfolios that Land Bank is doing. No? And if the requirement is a 14% return, then the first thing to look at is whether the investment or the potential investment of Maharlika will yield to 14%. No? That's where the moral hazard comes in. Parang no choice na kami, maglalagay na kami, bahala na, Mr. Chair, kung kikita yan o hindi. No? So that's where the moral hazard. And I think, Mr. Chair, going to that, the chairman requested the DOF to share with us the business plan, no? The direction of Maharlika in terms of investments, so that we will be comforted that there is indeed some form of roadmap or some form of direction, some form of analysis on where the funds will be invested. No? I think it's also giving us comfort that there's a direction. Hindi lang we'll create the fund and bahala na, we will be invest the amounts. No? So we'll request again. Yeah.
Yes, regarding maybe the PPP can do some comments, but I would suggest also perhaps for the committee, they submit also potential some potential partnerships or investment vehicles that the Maharlika Fund can possibly invest in the future. But anyway, can we ask for the PPP to comment on the concerns of Senator Gatchalian and the rest of the committee?
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman and the members of the committee. In terms of public-private partnerships, it's really the thrust, particularly the current economic team, is to make sure that development objectives are aligned across the economic plan. So we recently released the Philippine Development Plan, and the NEDA is currently finalizing the Philippine Infrastructure Plan. And a subsector of that would be which projects would be implemented through public-private partnerships. And while currently, the way that PPPs are currently structured is that we structure it such that the private sector will do the financing of these projects. But I think eventually when there is a Maharlika Investment Fund, we will certainly also need to do some policy initiatives to make sure that any government direct investments in these projects would also be able to avail of the returns that the private sector partners would get from the PPP projects.
With the permission of Senator Gatchalian, what will be your role sa Maharlika?
At the moment, hindi siya ganun ka-clear. But let's say if certain projects are, if let's say certain PPP projects will be looked at as potential investments of the fund, these PPP projects are those that have gone through vetting of the ICC through the Technical Board, Cabinet Committee, and the NEDA Board. So these would meet the investment criteria also of the Philippine government.
Siguro just to be clear, kasi diba kunwari PPP, may private sector, for example, NLEX, SLEX, diba? Yun yung example of PPP. But with the Maharlika Fund, paano ba yun? Si Maharlika Fund, magjo-joint venture with government?
Well, let's say if we talk about a road project, di ba? So, kunwari po, meron tayong city and we want to build a bypass road just to reduce congestion. It could be a case that as part of our infrastructure objectives, gagawin natin yung bypass road without making it a PPP because we just want to improve the economy in the area. But let's say we see a business case. This could be a PPP, and the private sector could undertake the role of financing it and operating it as a PPP project. So that's how we allocate
saan
projects.
papasok dun sa storya na yun, yung Maharlika Fund?
Actually, that could be, let's say, we could. It's not being done now because there's no Maharlika Fund. But let's say we could conceptually bid it such that we can say the Maharlika Fund has a participation in the project, let's say as an equity provider. So it's already, let's say, built in. We can say that Maharlika Fund is a 20% participation. So it could be conceptually done that way.
Mr. Chairman, siguro for submission na lang sa PPP, yung mga ganong conceptually possible with the Maharlika Fund.
Yes, so please, address the request of Senator Binay and have I think that's a very good point that we should already, as early as now, identify these projects. So there's the comfort level increases especially with the legislators, and they know that there are really outlets for the funding and what quality these outlets are. So, Senator, do you?
But just to terminate, Mr. Chair, and I'll just ask my other questions during the second round. Just to follow up the request, you requested this last time from the DOF on the potential investments. What type of returns are we looking at? What types of cash flows? What type of horizons are we looking at? Now we'll just await for that submission, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And we will follow up these submissions. And at this point, we'd like to recognize Senator Raffy Tulfo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the concerns raised by Mr. Calixto Chiquiamco. Thank you, sir. And I have some few questions for you. Tama po kayo, we're talking of people's money here, so we should really be very careful doon sa mga investment that we will be making. My question to you, sir, what do you think kung lagyan po natin ng put option contract yung investment? Lahat ng i-invest na pera ng Maharlika in any corporation dapat merong put option contract. Meaning, kapag halimbawa yung stocks ng isang corporation where the funds were invested in a certain corporation ay bumagsak. So, Maharlika has the right to sell back the investment at a predetermined price, or let's say the same price, yung pa rin yung premium kung magkano yung in-invest niya plus 30%. Para ma-ensure po yung investment.
Well, I don't think in all projects you can find somebody who will put a put option. Secondly, depende po yung kung sino yung counterparty, kung sino po yung nagpuput. Kung he has the financial capacity to make good on the put option.
Kaya nga po, mag-invest lang yung Maharlika doon sa mga company na kaya nilang panindigan or papayag sila because they have the capability when the time comes para to make good on that put option contract.
Kung merong mga kumpanyang it will maybe save the principal, but it's not without risk. Again, depending doon sa korporasyon na nagpuput that will back up the put option, no?
Okay. So you said it depends on the company na papayag o babakapan yung put option. Kaya sabi ko kanina, and then we should be very selective and choosy in approaching the corporation that we would invest our money in.
Pero sa pagkaalam ko po, invest nila to sa projects. Sinasabi nila, based on the newspaper, sa mga PPP projects, sa infrastructure, etc. Sino mag-put up ng put option doon sa mga na projects?
Okay. And then another thing na hindi po papasukan ng korupsyon. Ito pong Maharlika, my suggestion is we should not exempt the members of the board from criminal prosecution, especially kung meron pong nangyari mga bad investments due to selfish practices. Pwede silang dapat kasuhan ng plunder. What do you think of that, sir?
Well, we have no objection to that. It makes it's one step toward ensuring that the interests of the board are aligned with that of the corporation if they know that there are consequences to their action, no? But ang main point po is really the funding hindi po yung sa investment side, no? Maaari magkaroon po ng ibang mga assurances that this will not be subject to corruption, including mga good governance, audit, etc. Pero ang main point po namin yung sa funding kasi mas malaki because of the increase in the systemic risks to the banking system. Masusunog ho yung ating banking system pag ito ay at the present form. This is how it is structured.
Okay. Briefly, I'll talk about funding, kung saan pwede mag-source out pa ng pera para ma-invest ng Maharlika. Sa ngayon po kasi yung version ng House, it says that 10% will come from, yung 10% ata itatax from PAGCOR, tama? PAGCOR revenue, after the creation of Maharlika. So my suggestion is why not before and after. So yung present na mga gaming should also contribute 10% of their income to the Maharlika. Not only after. Kasi kung after, so ibig sabihin, kailangan pa natin mag-create na marami pang sugal para makahabol, para makaambag na maraming pera doon sa Maharlika. So it should start right off. Lahat ng mga gaming should also contribute and after the creation as well.
But why not privatize PAGCOR? You can get 100 billion or maybe more. You know,
Yes.
and then the government just sticks to regulation. It doesn't have to do the operations. You know, so that's one source of revenue. And even as I said, assets like Muntinlupa, the jail, you know, maybe it will get you 100 billion or something.
Okay, Mr. Chair, kasi kaya tinatanong ko si Mr. Chiquiamco kasi ngayon pinag-aralan ko pa rin po kung ano ba talaga magiging stand ko sa Maharlika Fund. Kung ito ba'y makakabuti sa taong bayan at kapag nakita ko na hindi, then I will not vote for it. For now, I'm in consultation with some economic experts and mga taong gusto kong malaman ang kanilang mga opinion tulad ng opinion ni Mr. Chiquiamco, which I really appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Chiquiamco, sir.
If I make another point, sinabi po ni Ms. Borromeo dito that may problema na absorptive capacity ang agriculture sector sa loans. So isang maaring gawin ng isang development financial institution really is it to go into agriculture, do farmland consolidation, agricultural estates, etc. na pwede nang pautangin doon, no? So or for example like yung industrial tree plantations, no? Or yung mga, sa ngayon wala pumapasok doon kasi may problema po sa ating konstitusyon na 25 years lang for exploitation of natural resources and another 25. Ang isang puno po, it takes about 10 to 20 years to grow. By the time it is finished, you cannot, you know, your license will be up, hindi ba? Pero kung ang gobyerno po ang papasok dito sa industrial tree plantation, then may assurance po yung mga co-investors that they will renew the permit, the 25-year concession. So these are some of the areas where a developmental financial institution can invest.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I filed my own version of the bill as a Maharlika. Maybe I'll be in consultation with Mr. Kiamco. Maybe he can help me para ma-fine-tune yung bill na ginagawa ko na para sa ikabubuti naman to ng taong bayan. So I'll be talking to you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Calixto, sir.
Thank you very
Thank you, Mr.
much,
Chair.
Senator Tulfo. At this point, we'd like to recognize Senator Nancy Binay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And magandang umaga po. Siguro kay Mr. Kiamco, what's your recommendation for Maharlika? Well, number one, should we just forget talking about this bill? Or number two, if we introduce certain amendments, it would be acceptable to your group? Or dapat mag-isip na lang ng another fund for specific use? Kasi parang yun yung naririnig ko sa inyo kanina na parang we can create parang a green fund to, I guess, to fund yung mga green projects or something similar to that.
Yes, well, it could be an expanded NDC or some other. First of all, the funding should not come really from the GFIs or the central bank, because it will put our banking system at risk. So that one. But it could be an expanded NDC or an MIF in which there will be initial funding from the government, and then there will be co-investment from multilaterals, from foreign investors, etc. But for specific, so that it will not compete with the private sector, because they're talking about PPP. So when will it? When are the situations where it will not compete with the PPP? In ang problema about going into infrastructure projects, no? At the same time, yung conflict of objectives which we raised, will it seek to maximize the return, or will look after public welfare? Kunyari sa PPP. Kunyari sa SLEC, tataas ba nila yung toll? They will have to keep on increasing the toll if you want to reach a certain rate of return. Paano naman yung mga commuters natin pag ganoon nangyari? No? So mas mainam na i-clarify natin objectives so that it does not compete with the private sector, and that where there is a contribution by the government to that project nga. For example nga, as I told you, where there are property rights are uncertain, where it is more advantageous for government to do it, like consolidating farmlands. Because even the DA says importante na to consolidate farmlands for bigger and better managed farms. Mas mainam kung ang gobyerno ang gagawa nun. Hindi ba?
And for that reason, the Maharlika fund would be acceptable.
Yes, and yes. As long as it's again not funded by the GFIs and the BSP, it's acceptable. I think there is a role for a Maharlika fund in certain instances.
Thank you po. Sa land bank naman po, you mentioned kanina na meron ho kayong 1.3 trillion investable amount. And then 261 billion ho yung sa agricultural loans. That amount ho ba is ideal na for you in terms of target? Ano, parang for land bank, magkano ho ba talaga dapat yung gusto nyo na ipautang sa ating mga magsasaka? For example, kunyari, absorptive capacity is not a problem.
Thank you, Senator Binay. Yung the 1.3 trillion na investments, those are, as I mentioned earlier, basically government issuances of bonds or T-bills. Hindi po kasali yung 261 billion na pinautang namin sa mga magsasaka at mga ibang players sa agribusiness value chain. Yung loan portfolio po namin, 1.1 trillion, dun po kasama yung 261 billion. To answer po your question, will we be willing to, or will we be funding more loans to the agri-sector if absorptive capacity is not an issue? Our answer, ma'am, is yes, definitely. Because one, that will have a greater impact, direct impact on the development of the countryside, which is basically the mandate of Land Bank, and the returns from loan issuances.
Okay, and sa NEDA ho, meron na ho ba tayong ginawang pag-aaral kung paano natin bibigyan ng solusyon tong absorptive capacity?
Of the Agriculture Center.
Yes po.
Yes, yes. Actually, thank you for the question, Madam Senator. Yung mga binanggit kanina ni Mr. Chiquiampo, actually, yun ang mga magagandang solusyon dito. Kasi nga, ang nagiging problema is the bankability of the projects, and the major limitation really is yung land mismo. So, ang isang maganda nga nito is kung magkakaroon nga ng consolidation, ito yung makakasagot. And if you have yung ang longer lease. Right now, yung sa ating mga agricultural development products, development programs, nandun siya sa modernization. Meron din tayo mga farm consolidation in the sugar industry. So kung itong mga to, and of course yung cooperativism in the sugar industry, I suppose sila na yung pwede maging bankable. But going forward, it will really have to be with respect to addressing the constraints to that low bankability. But for the current pipeline of programs, it has to do with the technology, yung mga inputs, the modernization po.
But yung problema ho dun sa absorptive capacity, which parang hindi nga lang to, Mr. Chairman, sa agriculture, di ba? I mean, DPWH, lagi natin narinig every time na we do discuss the budget, it's the absorptive capacity. So kung as NEDA, meron na ho ba kayong ginawang pag-aaral or kung saan mabibigyan ng solusyon itong problema natin sa absorptive capacity?
If I may, yung pong, I think yun sa issue ng sa DPWH, this is with respect to implementation of projects. So kung dito po, actually isa na rin po to sa pinag-uusapan namin with the DBM, na yun ang kailangan nating i-improve, yung implementation capacity of our agencies. So kung halimbawa merong...
So meron ho ba yung NEDA na plano kung paano nga natin masosolve yung problema na yan? Kasi di ba parang si Land Bank, hindi sila makapagpautang kasi nga yung nasa agriculture may problema sa absorptive capacity. So why don't we solve that problem para si Land Bank can fulfill its mandate na tulungan yung ating mga magsasaka?
Pwede po kami mag-submit ng kasi medyo makulot po yung usapin, and I think some of this will also require legislation para ma-address yung iba-ibang mga constraints po.
And would Maharlika solve that absorptive capacity?
Kasi kung halimbawa po kasi by legislation, just like yung sa National Development Corporation, it was actually given the authority to consolidate lands up to 50,000 hectares, if I'm not mistaken. So ganun kalaki kasi yung kailangan mo na scale. So given our current regulatory framework, hindi pwede yan. Pero kasi dahil may legislation, nagawa yon kasi yun nga government naman yung magpapatakbo nun. So I guess kung sa Maharlika, if there will be that authority or the mandate of the fund or yung MIC nga to address those constraints, then
pero wala rin
makakatulong po.
sa mandate ng Maharlika to consolidate lands, di ba? So if yun yung isang problema, why don't we just kasi di ba yung isang daw is matanda na yung NDC. So why don't we just, kumbaga, update it instead of creating another fund? Na kung ang problema is consolidation, it addresses that corporation already addresses that, di ba? So parang iti-tweak na lang natin, kumbaga ano yan, mas adaptive dun sa current situation natin instead of starting with a new fund.
If you don't mind, Madam Senator, mas alam po ng Treasurer, ng Bureau of Treasury yung issue po ng sa National Development Corporation. Thank you.
Siguro Treasurer De Leon.
Please.
Ma'am, pwede pong can just backtrack nung sa absorptive capacity po, unang question. Yung pong absorptive capacity natin, hindi lang po dahil sa yung pag-implement ng projects. Ang una rin po doon, yung ating budget. I'm sorry ma'am, bumabalik po lagi kami sa fiscal constraints na we cannot widen yung pong, or yung accelerate yung infrastructure development kahit na po yung mga farm-to-market roads dahil nga we are trying to make do within the fiscal envelope that we have right now. Saka syempre ho, pag malaki po yung deficit, malaki yung utang. So, ang ginagamit po natin ngayon, yung pong hindi po mapautang ni Land Bank para ilagay po kay Maharlika. Ngayon po si Maharlika, sabi nga po, 100 billion lang yan. Pero pwede po mapalago si Maharlika kasi nga po, will be going into co-investments sa private sector. At doon po na-address yung capacity constraints dahil alam po natin mas better implementers po ang private sector. And lalong-lalo na po will be able to attract yung pong mga foreign investors because they will have the technology, even yung capacity know-how. At the same time, we're also addressing yung logistics problem natin. Di ba sir, yung mga post-harvest facilities, yung mga storage facilities, yung pong mga ganun na pwedeng gawin po ng private sector. And with that, mapapalago pa ho yung pagpapautang. Dalawa pong both ways. Hindi lang po si Maharlika, kundi pati po yung expand ng absorptive capacity ni Land Bank. So yung ganun po yung thinking namin. So we're also doing some simulation analysis kasi po we also did in terms of the portfolio ng fund. Kung himbawa po, tinignan po namin yung ating mga other mga holding companies, the likes ng mga Aboitiz, mga ASEN, mga nag-invest po sa power, sa utilities, sa infrastructure, and we've seen how much yung pong kanilang return right now. So with that, and also, kung nag-invest po, bawa po lang sa portfolio allocation na 50-50, nag-50% po tayo sa capital market, or nag-50% po tayo sa infrastructure, lumalabas rin po na magiging mas malaki po yung return ni Land Bank rather than po ini-invest lang sa GS. Kasi po sa GS siguro kikita sila ng, let's say, 5%. Pero dito po, pag kinumbine po with the Maharlika, dahil meron po silang fixed investments, at lumalaki po, mas malaki po yung kanilang kikitain. So there's really better room, higher room for them to invest in this portfolio. Salamat po.
Sen, can I just really quickly? I guess maybe it might be a good idea that maybe we can do some modeling, maybe some financial models for potential investments. I mean, of course, there's no, it won't be as precise as the actual, obviously, but maybe we can do some modeling of some scenarios that are possible should the Maharlika come into existence. Just at least so we can see more or less what maybe based on some of the potential investments, what sort of some basic modeling, so at least it would give the committee some ideas on what sort of what is the potential for Maharlika. Please proceed.
But at its present form, walang interest income ang Land Bank, di ba, and DBP? Sa Maharlika at its present form. Di ba wala kayong walang dividend, walang return na ganun eh. Correct? At its present form. Diba? So technically, yung 1.3 trillion yun na ini-invest nyo ngayon sa equities and bonds. May diba, securities, may nakukuha kayo at the moment, right? Which is how many percent? Yeah.
If I may answer,
Yes.
Senator Binay, through the chair. The return on our equity is 14%. The average yield of our investment is almost 4%, ma'am.
Yung 4% of for the securities.
Yes.
And then for equities ho,
The return on equity po is 14%.
14%.
Average yield po ng loans namin is about 5.75%.
Okay. And with Maharlika, it's 0.
Its current form po, the bill does not specify a guaranteed ROI.
Pero wala kayo nung makukuha na 14%, 4%, none.
No, ma'am.
So
but
wala
the
nga.
bill does not have any provision and
And pag inalis namin yung sovereign guarantee, would you still want to be part of Maharlika?
I think I've answered that when Senator Gatchalian asked it.
Hindi, ano nga ho, kasi kanina dun sa tanong ni Senator Sherwin, hindi naman niya sinabi na aalisin yung sovereign guarantee. Para ngayon, di ba? Para ngayon okay kayo kasi alam niyo naman na guaranteed yan, di ba? Kahit walang return.
If there will be no guarantees on our investment, then we will have to conduct the usual due diligence that we conduct whenever we lend or whenever we invest po.
Sige, can you submit to us? Kasi may mga suggestions nga na alisin yung sovereign guarantee. What would the implication sa Land Bank and sa DBP pag inalis namin tong sovereign guarantee?
If the guarantees will be removed, Madam Senator, and there will be no regulatory relief given to the investors, the Land Bank and DBP, the investment will carry a 100% weight on our assets and will be deducted from our capital, and so it will adversely affect our capital adequacy ratio.
Yung
Thank you.
scenario naman, kunwari, walang sovereign guarantee, pero may makuha kayong, let's say, 16%, 20%. Would that be acceptable?
That will be a very attractive investment, Madam Senator.
So at what percentage kayo comfortable?
Our comparative ratio, ma'am, is because we are investing and we will be in the fund and in the corporation, in the MIC, for the long term, it will be compared to the return and the equity of the government in Land Bank.
And
And
ilang
last
percent po
year,
yun?
the return of the government's equity in Land Bank was 14%.
So dapat more than 14% po. Siguro, Treasurer De Leon, kaya ho ba yun? With
Sir, ganito
Maharlika?
na lang, ma'am, if I may lang po. First of all, siguro ika-qualify rin po ni Ma'am Cecil na yung pong 14%, merong pong non-recurring din po doon because yung pong acquisition ng UCPB, so ma'am, which they declared as dividend. So they should look at it in yung long-term average. Ngayon po, in terms of the return, yung pong we're also looking at the best practices. Siyempre, we want positive return. So that's something that's higher than inflation. At ang long-term target naman po natin would be siguro sa 2 to 4% po ni Bangko Sentral. So it should be higher than the inflation para real positive return. Pangalawa po, it should be siguro, it would be something higher than the cost of borrowing nung po ni Maharlika, which could be also something similar to government borrowing cost, no? So ngayon po kami, nang hirap, yung RTV po namin, ongoing pa po, ang yield, ang coupon po namin doon, 6%. So, yun po.
Magkano ho yung yield?
Ang coupon po is 5%, ma'am.
5%.
6% pala, yung RTV namin na 5.5. So, last day na po ngayon ng aming offer period.
Ilang years ho yung
5.5 years po, ma'am. So, yun po. So, yun po yung mga parameters that we're going to look into. Yun pong should be providing us the positive return So higher than inflation. Pangalawa po, yun nga po, it should also be higher than your cost of borrowing para nababayaran po natin yung ating utang. So that would be the parameter siguro po when we're looking into the portfolio.
Yeah. So at the moment, what is the cost of borrowing?
Namin po, mga 5%, 5 to 6%.
And then inflation rate?
Mataas lang po ngayon, 8.7 the last print. Pero ang normal po dapat, they will attain the 2 to 4% target po ng BSP.
Talaga ho, makakabalik tayo sa 2 to 4%?
Confident, ma'am. Fighting.
Ng inflation? Oo nga eh. Can BSP,
By next year,
meron ho ba tayong magandang ganon na hinaharap next year? Pero matagal pa ho yung next year eh. Kakastart pa lang ng 2023 eh.
Your Honor, by next year, ang projection natin ay within target na tayo. Kasi ang sources of inflation naman natin, puro pinag-umpisahan, mga driven by supply. Kaya lang ngayon, meron din kaming nakikita na may spillover sa demand. So,
For
yun ang
example, for
minamanage.
2023, itong quarter ito, what was your projection?
Nung nakaraang monetary board meeting, ang ano ho namin, ang projection per year ang ginagawa namin eh. So nung nakaraang monetary board meeting, ang aming projected inflation for the year ay nasa 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 4.5% po average for this year. Pero ngayon, actually bukas, magmi-meeting ang monetary board kasi magbibigay kami ng mga revised projection.
Sana ho, gagawin niyo ng 8.
Ano pa ho yun? For deliberation bukas. At ang main ano doon, driver would be, we will take the January inflation into account. Kasi mataas ho yung January inflation, higher than what we had projected. Yun hong projection ng BSP, ang nung January ay hanggang 8.3 yung range ng projection namin. Yung nangyari ay 8.7, so above our projected range of inflation. So this would have to be modified yung 4.5.
So may scenario ho na tataasan niya yung projection niya for this year?
Malamang ho. As to the actual projection, that would have to be announced tomorrow
Okay.
after the monetary board meeting.
Sige po. And dun ho sa Maharlika, ano ba yung projected return or what would be the yield?
Ma'am, we're doing preliminary simulations lang po, and that's something we can submit to you. Pero right now po, given po yung the way we're looking and we look into yun nga po yung returns of our yung ating mga holding companies na mga infrastructure, power, utilities, infrastructure, logistics, and then also looking into the portfolio. Bawa mini-mirror natin yung pong asset allocation ng Temasek, ng GIC, wherein conservatively mga 5%, and then yung pong moderate case mga 7 to 9, and I think we're also reaching mga 12%. So
Hindi, pero kasi treasury, di ba you said 5%?
conservative po
Di ba
yun.
currently umuutang ho tayo ng 5%?
So, ma'am,
Diba?
kasi
So, parang-
that's very kasi we are putting on a worst case scenario na parang ano ba yung pinaka-pangit na performance ngayon, and we know na medyo hindi naman po maganda yung performance of the market right now. So, but on a moderate case, we're looking at 7 to 9%.
So siguro kunwari, yung currently yung pag umutang tayo, it's 5%, right? So sa Maharlika, let's say 7%, eh di ba meron pa hutong ano yan, parang may, magbabayad pa tayo ng, I don't know what's the correct term, yung parang agent's fee.
Kasama na po ma'am lahat doon kasi this is already parang yung return nyo na po, net of taxes, net of
Pasok
everything.
na yun doon sa, hindi kasi di ba yung magmamanage ng fund, parang,
Pasok na rin po doon ma'am.
how
The
much is
other-
that? How much is that out of the 5%?
Mga
Di ba yung parang sa mga
70.
investment banker, parang meron silang, ano ba yung correct term doon?
yung pong asset, yung fund
Hindi,
management
hindi
fee.
commission yung word eh.
External
It's,
management fee.
it's something else.
Management fee po, sinasabi. Mga less than 1% lang. Mga 0.05 lang. Kami nga po, 5 dips lang yun eh.
And wala dun sa bill na ano, no?
Meron naman pong cap on the admin cost.
Which is how
The
much?
2%.
2%. So na-incorporate nyo na yung
Yes, ma'am.
2% dun sa 5%?
Yeah, we also did yung pong tinatawag nating risk return. So parang nakita po namin na for every peso na you invested, ang balik po 1.62 peso. So yun po yung parang ina-adjust po natin for the risk kasi against a risk-free asset. So may mga ganun naman pong nagawa ng mga studies pero of course we're still refining it para mas maging given yung market developments.
Siguro, Mr. Chairman, hanggang wala kasi itong mga portfolio, parang ang hirap mag-decide eh. Speaking as a layman, di ba parang pag uutang ka sa bangko, kailangan alam mo na kung saan gagastusin yan, di ba? Either magpapatayo ka ng bahay or may negosyo kang papasukan. But at its present form, yung sa Maharlika, parang hindi namin alam kung saan gagastusin eh. And
Yes.
for as long as we don't have that, parang yung comfort level nga is medyo hindi ano ba yan?
Yes.
Parang hindi kampante.
Yeah, I'm sure the NEDA and the financial institutions have people very capable of doing financial models. So for the comfort of the committee, perhaps we can ask them to do some financial models for
Or
the fund.
Siguro just to backtrack, Mr. Chairman, hindi ba nung naisip niyo tong Maharlika Fund, dapat naisip niyo muna kung saan gagastusin? Wala bang, can you like present to us when you were doing the, ano ba yan, TWG, na parang meron na kayong, for example, ito yung paggagamitan namin, and ito yung kailangan. Kasi dapat meron kayong pinaghugutan kung saan yung sinabi na kailangan namin ng 50 billion from Land Bank or 25 billion from DBP. Meron ho ba kayong masasubmit sa committee na during your TWG na para kayong modeling or something like that?
We can submit po. And yung sa legislation naman po, nakalagay doon yung mga allowable investments that we also have cited. Tapos ma'am, I think also NEDA, they also already identified mga 87 projects na parang pwede pong doon mag-invest si Maharlika.
And submitted na ho sa committee yung 87?
No, you will please. We will instruct them now to please submit those and.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield na the floor to the minority floor leader.
Yes, at this point we'd like to recognize. Sen Coco Pimentel. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just ask my questions, my cross-examination questions during the plenary. Should this ever reach the plenary, Mr. Chairman? But from the point of view of the minority, just for the information of everybody, minority po kasi kami, we observe the majority aligned with the admin, and we see what you're doing. You're conducting a very expensive public brainstorming. Yan ang ginagawa ninyo eh. Expensive in terms of resources and in time, which you should have done months ago before actually making the proposal. Yan ang nangyayari po. I see the National Treasurer sending instructions to the LBL Land Bank representatives to tone down the 14%. Dapat nag-usap na po kayo beforehand. May non-recurring pala dun. Di, sinabihan nyo na sana. Don't use that 14% rate of return kasi may non-recurring dun. I mean, well, this is just the minority speaking. No? Should this ever reach but I hope that it does not in its current form. The National Treasurer assures us na merong listahan ng mga allowable investments. Meron pang last paragraph dun eh. And all other investments as may be decided by the board. Di sino naglolokohan dito? Di ba? You make it appear to Japanese investors, oh, we're very strict. Pero sa dulo, may lusot. There is a 2% cap on administration and operating expenses. But there is a section 17 which allows additional expenses na wala ng cap. Oh, well, at any rate, Mr. Chairman, I mean, being an administration measure, masyadong, well, the Senate should not allow this to pass in its current form. It's a very disappointing to be an administration measure. Ang assumption kasi, if it's an administration measure, backed up by all the best lawyers and bill drafters of the administration na po yan. And yet, ito'y resulta. And then we hear news about the President reporting the Japanese investors are excited to invest in the Maharlika fund. Where is the mechanism in the current bill? How do they invest? Wala din dun. Oh, sa mechanism, kasi sa distribution of profits, hindi yata na-envision ang distribution of profit to a third-party participating investor. Wala dun eh. Oh. Tapos, this Maharlika Investment Corporation can directly give ayuda. Andun yung naka-insert yung word na directly. Ano naman meaning nun? I mean, another DSWD. So what are we doing here? I mean, di ba? I mean, there will now be ayuda distributed to the poorest of the poor. Ang tarpaulin sa likod is Maharlika Investment Corporation. Ano nangyari? What's happening? What is happening? What is the real purpose of this proposal? Hindi po namin makuha sa pagbabago ng anyo, nagbago ang anyo sa House, pagdating dito sa Senate. We notice also, Mr. Chairman, that yung bang introductory statement, yung explanatory note, no? Explanatory note of the bill of our chairman does no longer mention sovereign wealth fund. So definitely nag-shift na. But the bill mentions the Santiago Principles, which is about what? Sovereign wealth fund. So, ito from the minority lang po ito, no? I mean, sayang eh. I mean, an administration measure, and yet the quality of the proposal is that low, is that confused. Sana po ayusin na lang po muna ninyo so that, sayang, yung time ko sana na inaaral ko na ito sa RCEP, inaaral ko na ito sa cultural mapping, sa aral intervention program ni Senator Win Gatchalian. Oh, ganun po nangyayari. We are really conducting a very expensive public brainstorming sessions on a proposal coming from the administration na not well thought out, not well planned. Naghahanap ang mga majority senators ng business plan. Wala. What's happening? So, yun lang po, Mr. Chairman. I hope this is not rushed. Whatever you can cure, please cure. And then, nabanggit naman, ako actually when I first heard this, sabi ko, hindi ba to parang NDC rin eh. So, I think Mr. Chiquiamco mentioned NDC and Yusek Edilion. Should there be another hearing, Mr. Chairman, let's invite NDC. And according to my staff, under daw yan sa DTI. So sama na natin sila so that they can talk about their history, their funding, their achievements. Hindi siya sikat eh. Hindi siya sikat na corporation, but it's a GOCC as far as I know. Hindi siya sikat. Funded with 10 billion in 1979. What would 10 billion be, ma'am, in today's value if it's in 1979? Sige ma'am, ano yung NEDA na or BSP ang makaano sa akin? Meron na rin akong estimate ng konti. Hindi pa rin siya sikat. Hindi pa rin siya sa Norway's sovereign wealth fund or yung parati natin binabanggit na Temasek ng Singapore na nalugi naman ng $200 million doon sa pag-invest nila sa FTX. It's a professionally run wealth fund or asset management fund. Nag-invest sa company na naka-shorts, naka-shorts yung CEO, walang board of directors. Naglalaro ng video game. Tapos talo $200 million. Professionally run investment corporation na parati nating sinasite na bilib tayo. So, what would it be, mga 200 billion, no? Siguro? Estimate lang. Sino? May own other investments. So, ganun po yun. No? I'm just saying na we gave NDC by law 10 billion pesos in 1979. Malaking halaga po yun. And hindi pa rin siya ganun kasikat hanggang ngayon. I mean, but, and I see some of the purposes of the Maharlika, parang ganun lang din sa NDC. Yes, ma'am, ano ma'am estimate natin?
183, Senator.
183. No? So, in-renound off ko na sa 200. Give or take a mistake of 10%, di ba? So, yan po yun, no? So, that's the experience with the NDC. So, ano lang po kami. So, the minority will just be here to observe how the majority is processing and handling this issue, and we will be ready with our questions during the plenary. But we are praying that this will not reach the plenary, Mr. Chairman, if ganito lang po kalito. Actually, yung Senate version nagbago na nga. Yung House version may 4 na sa section 2 doon. Andun yung 4 na goals ng when people who know the finance world read the 4 objectives, parang sabihin nila, how can all those 4 be achieved all at the same time? Andun po sa House bill. So okay, so we are just here to present the other possible points of view, Mr. Chairman, to test the validity of the proposal. So all the way from what is the real reason why we are entertaining this proposal, where would the funds come from, what will be the role of this corporation, yung mga safeguards, nandyan, all the way to the name. All the way to the name. At the plenary level, we will ask even about the name of the corporation, Mr. President. So, yun na muna, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you to our minority floor leader. At this point, since we also consider the opinions of the general public in this hearing, we have some questions posted by netizens from the Senate FB Live, and I'd like to share these questions with our resource persons. Question 1. Bakit kailangan i-invest pa ang mga government offices yung investable funds nila sa Maharlika? Di po ba nila pwede invest directly yung funds nila at wag na dumaan sa Maharlika? So if you can answer, Ma'am Treasurer De Leon.
Nabanggit po kanina ni President Cecil na yun nga po, meron silang 1.3 trillion investable funds, and at the same time, I think sa DBP around 800 billion naman po ang available nila. So, but at the same time po, hindi nila mas napapalend ho yun dahil may mga constraints like po yung single borrower's limit, Meron din po silang mga issues about yung mga regulatory compliances. So with this Maharlika Fund, they're just putting po mga around 4% of their investable funds. At with this amount na like 100 billion, mas wider po yung options natin, mas marami po tayong pwedeng paggamitan at dalhin po ito para ma-accelerate ang infrastructure development natin at pati po mga social services. Makakatulong rin po ito para po mas mabawasan po yung pressure sa fiscal sa ating budget dahil nga po hindi po natin masyadong mapalakihan ng spending natin dahil otherwise mas magbo-bloat po ang ating fiscal deficit.
Isa pang yes, go ahead.
Hindi, kasi Treasurer Delaney, you mentioned parang isa dun sa constraint yung regulatory function. Hindi ba mako-cure yan ng legislation?
Kung ilalagay niyo po sa legislation like po yung wala pong charge sa kapital, pwede pong ma-cure po yun.
Dahil hindi na kailangan ng Maharlika Fund.
Kailangan sa Maharlika Fund po yun pag nilagay po nila. So, hindi na po kailangan ng guarantee namin.
Hindi, kasi di ba parang you were saying kanina na, kasi di ba ang tanong bakit kailangan pa ng Maharlika
But kasi
Fund?
ma'am, yung iba po doon, in accordance with the Basel. So, I'm not sure kung pwede po legislation mag-cure noon.
Another from our FB Live, isa pang may netizen na may katanungan. Pwede din kaya kami mag-invest sa Maharlika?
Ang isa ho sa mga ini-envision sa Maharlika, magkakaroon po ng maraming mga funds. Yung sub-fund po, yung main fund, tapos magkakaroon po ng mga sub-fund. So meron po tayong sub-fund for high yield income, mga investments. So pwede doon pumasok po yung mga individuals. Pwede rin po silang pumasok pag nagkaroon po ng mga infrastructure projects. Pwede rin pong kasi pwede pong ng debt po yung pong fund na yon. So pwede pong doon po bumili. Like yung mga retail treasury products po ng treasury. So, pwede pong i-structure na yung fund, magkaroon po ng ganong mga mechanisms.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to recognize the presence of Senator Francis Tolentino. I'd also like to recognize him for some questions, and after which Senator Win would like to ask some questions on his second round. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, although I'm tired because I just came from Subic in Olongapo. Met all your local treasurers and assessors. Some were apprehensive about this, some are supportive. At the outset, ako ata yung unang nag-support dito. Just some questions, although not physically prepared. Siguro next round, dagdagan ko. Taxation. Initially, based on my computation, although I'm not good in math, the minority leader is better prepared. Perhaps there's somebody here from the BIR. From the bills filed, the Senate version and the House version, can I be clarified as to, simple muna, mahirap yung next hearing, perhaps I'll be asking about the redemption, the accruals, etc. Simple muna tayo. Documentary stamp tax. My computation is that, correct me if I'm wrong, who is gonna answer?
Most likely, dependent, but most likely National Treasurer.
National Treasurer. Good, I'm directly in front of your
I'll try my
firing
very
line.
best po.
Based on my computation, for instance, this is hypothetical. There is, would you confirm that there is a possibility at the outset that the government might lose potential earnings on documentary stamp tax alone? My computation is this. If the MIC has issued shares of stock or mutual fund certificates, the documentary stamp tax would be 2 pesos on each 200 pesos. Tama po ba yan? Computation ko yan? Based on NIRC?
Sir, pasensya po, at the outset, I would say na hindi po ako familiar dun sa tax code.
Anybody
Unfortunately.
from the BIR here? Finance, BIR?
Yes.
tax expert, taxpayer, tax evader, or what? Di bale, ito na lang, hypothetical. You can answer this next.
Sige, sige sir.
You might be able to answer.
We'll consult na lang po
Yes.
with BIR.
So, under the House bill, which has a 250 billion capitalization, correct? 200 na bago na?
Nga, 5.
5 na, oh. Dito muna tayo.
250 sa luma po. Sige po.
Luma na tong sa akin eh. Kasi
Yung pong luma.
kapupunta ko sa ibang lugar, iba na pala yung hawak kong papel. Sorry. For instance, if it's the original 250 billion capitalization, the documentary stamp tax payable is 2.5 billion pesos upon issuance. Kung luma pa rin itong Senate bill with the 75 billion capitalization, the DST payable is 750 million upon issuance. Pag ano naman, if MIC issues debt instruments, the DST rate is 1 peso and 50 centavos on each 200 pesos. So under the House bill before, but the computation would still be applicable. 250 billion capitalization, the DST payable is 1.875 billion upon issuance. Under the Senate bills, with 75 billion capitalization, the DST payable is 562.5 million pesos upon issuance. Kung exempt kagad, wala na kagad yung 2.5 billion upon issuance. Wala na kagad yung 750 million pesos upon issuance. If I may suggest, ma'am, your answer should go like this. Your honors, comma, in the long run, comma. Tuloy mo na. Malaki mawawala, oh.
Ano ba to? Your honors, if I may po, given yung pong ano nyo, yung
Question yun sa akin, ma'am.
ano po, what I can say, pwede po bang we just refer to our Bureau of Internal Revenue para po we can confirm po yung
Assuming my
computations nyo.
figures are correct. Assuming my figures are correct. How do you offset this? Initially, wala, no? Hindi mo tinuloy yung nakasubong predicate ko in the long run, Your Honors.
Ganito po mangyayari. So, mawawala nga po sa collection ng national government, pero at the same time, meron naman po mga expenditures na nasa budget na pwede pong ang mag-i-implement na po, ang gagastos na yon na po ay the Maharlika Fund. Kasi po, we can, di ba, with the Maharlika Fund, some of the projects po ng national government which are already in the priority list, pwede pong ipondo na po ng Maharlika Fund. So, meron pong pwede po magkaroon ng wash.
$2.5 billion, 750 million.
Mapupunta po dun sa, hindi na po, mapupunta po dun sa Maharlika Fund na siya naman po magpopondo ng mga projects na sana gagawin po ng national government.
Can you explain that during the next hearing once you have consulted with the BIR
Sige po,
as to the
the shift.
accuracy of all of this? I have another question, Mr. Chairman, but apparently, with all due respect, the BIR is not here. It has something to do not just with the documentary stamp tax, but the tax that would involve unrealized gains. Baka next meeting na rin o ano. I have questions concerning unrealized gains and the taxes on income upon redemption. So the precept is this: when the investor invests, there is a transfer of ownership, correct? So if there is a transfer of ownership, the investor is now the owner. Under both bills coming from the House and the bills coming from this chamber, exempt lahat. Tama? So yung accruals, kaya nyo explain yun o next meeting na?
Turn na lang po, sir, yung BIR po
BIR na.
sumagot.
So, Mr. Chairman, can we request the presence of the BIR representative, BIR commissioner, assistant commissioner, to better educate this committee as to the probable tax implications of this. But again, I reiterate, I'm supportive. And then my other question, Mr. Chairman, I hope, I'm looking around, I hope it can be answered by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Securities and Exchange Commission, present, online. Can we, Mr. Chairman, can we summon the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission for the next hearing? Suki ko na rin yung Securities and Exchange Commission.
Is there a representative from the SEC online? If there is, please identify yourself and please speak.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. I'm Attorney Aljon Lacanaria from the Office of the General Counsel of the SEC.
Siya rin yung sumasagot dati sa amin eh. Sa laptop, paano ka? Suki ka namin.
Yes, yes po.
So just quick questions concerning the Securities Regulation Code. So how would you term the documents to be issued here? Are they securities, ma'am?
Sorry.
If I invest,
Yes, sir.
I get the paper.
The type of investment that the MIC will issue are securities under the bill.
So if they are securities and can be sold, resold, would you require registration?
Sir, considering that the MIC is considered a chartered GOCC, they will be exempt from the registration of securities under the SRC since these are technically issued by the government.
So you're now invoking Section 9 of the Securities Regulation Code. Section 9.1, requirement of registration under subsection 8.1 shall not, as a general rule, apply to any of the following classes: securities issued or guaranteed by the government of the Philippines or any political subdivision or agency thereof, or by any person controlled or supervised by law and acting as an instrumentality of the government. Yun ba yan?
Yes po.
What about the apparent differences between the House bill and the Senate bills? Naaral niyo yan?
So we weren't able to compare pa po the stated differences.
Okay.
On what provision po?
Let me clarify you and guide you here. The Senate bills, the House bill muna. The House bill apparently has no problem with the Securities Regulations Code because it already exempts. Ito na yung napag-usapan natin kanina. It specified that only GFIs are exempt from regulatory restrictions. On the Senate bills, the provisions contradict with the SRC. The bills provide that the SRC should be made to apply. Should be made to apply. Nabasa niyo yun, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Maybe, sir, the intention of the provision that the SRC will apply on the MIC and MIF is maybe on the provision on transparency and disclosure. Kasi there is a provision in the bill that
Which bill are you referring to,
disclosure
ma'am?
requirements under the SRC shall be followed by the MIC.
Ano bang bill ang tinutukoy niyo, ma'am? The House bill or the Senate version? Ulitin ko, ma'am. For instance, ma'am, the House bill categorizes the MIC as a GOCC while the Senate bills define it as state investment body. Kung hindi pa nababago to, baka nabago na, Mr. Chairman, ginulo ko lang kayo. Hence, by applying the SRC, MIF is not exempt from registration. Okay? If it is the intention, with all due respect to my colleagues who filed, including the chairman, if it is the intention to make the Senate to make the Senate version, to make the SRC rules on registration applicable on the MIF bill, it should have been stated there. Tama po ba yan, ma'am? Nag-submit po ba kayo ng position paper?
Sir, we have submitted a position paper, but on the particular inquiries of Senator Lauren Legarda and ASG.
Can you...
But we will submit a position paper on this, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman, can we require the SEC to be present likewise physically during the next hearing? Hindi ko na po itutuloy ito kasi...
Yes, we can request
Yes,
that.
and including the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Yun lamang po, ayoko na pong patagalin yung pananghalian nila.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tolentino. At this point, we'd like to
Mr.
recognize
Chairman,
Senator...
just a request
Oh,
dun
yes.
sa SEC, can they make a position paper on the whole bill? Kasi parang yung sinabit pala nila was dun kay Senator Lauren Legarda lang.
Please, can you furnish us with your opinion on the whole Maharlika bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will submit a position paper on the bill.
Thank you. At this point, we'd like to recognize Senator Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for another chance of clarifying some issues. I'll go back to the presentation of Mr. Chiquiamco of FEF. And one of the issues here is the funding source. Particularly, he mentioned funding source from the BSP, Mr. Chiquiamco. And it's also in the presentation, there's also a note here that the net worth of BSP, NW's net worth, no, I would assume, tama po ba? Here in your presentation, from 145 billion in December of 2019 to 85 billion in 2020. No. So there's a decrease. And I think the argument here is, here's also written, we need a strong BSP in the area of economic and geopolitical uncertainty. We all know that at this time, the world has become super uncertain because of the Ukraine issue here in our region. Oil has been fluctuating wildly, so is currencies are fluctuating wildly. One day we wake up at 59 per dollar, now we wake up at 54 per dollar. So it's really uncertain. So I think the argument here is we need to have a strong Banco Central. What is the present capitalization now, Deputy Governor?
Your Honor, it's 60 billion pesos.
To date, it's 60 billion pesos.
Yes.
Okay. Because what in the balance sheet in 2021 is 50 billion pesos.
It's 50 and there's an additional 10 billion.
So in to date, 2023,
It would be at 60 billion.
60 billion. Mr. Chairman, in 2019, we enacted a law to increase the capitalization of BSP. Tama po ba, Deputy Governor?
Tama po yun.
And the target is 200 billion pesos, correct?
Tama po.
That law was enacted in 2019. From 2019 to date, how come only 10 billion was increased?
Ano po yun dahil sa pandemic.
So
lahat ng ahensya ng gobyerno nagtutulungan para ma-address yung impact ng pandemic sa ekonomiya at nag-decide po na wag na munang i-pursue yung kapitalisasyon.
So ibigay muna sa panglaban sa pandemic.
Opo.
All right. But now we all agree that the pandemic is already almost over. No, wala na nga tayong mask dito eh. No, so and everyone's going to the mall. And I remember when we were discussing, Senator Binay was there, during the discussion of that bill, that's RA 11211, an act amending Republic Act number 7653, otherwise known as the New Central Bank Act, and for other purposes. When we were discussing this, the debates actually started in 2016. Ganun ho kaaga yung debates. And let me just read an excerpt from the transcript. That time it was BSP Governor Tetanco was speaking. We present to the Senate the case for ensuring the corporate viability of the BSP. We seek for an increase in its capitalization by 150 billion. The economy has expanded. The financial system it supervises has grown many times over, while the BSP capitalization has remained constant in the last 23 years. To better manage the risk it faces in its operations, we seek the authority to establish adequate loss allowances and create reserve buffers. In recognition that the funds deployed by the BSP are public in nature, we ask for the restoration. We can skip that, no? And it goes, yung tax exempt kasi yun. We'll go to the next paragraph. Mr. Chairman, we wish to convey to you that the BSP, once strengthened, can be even more responsive in meeting the challenges to the economy and the financial system over the coming decades. And even stronger BSP can help more efficiently create the space for the Philippine economy to continue and flourish despite the many challenges it will face. That's in 2016 po. So in 2016, the intention was there to increase the capitalization to 150 billion. No? We understand that the pandemic was unforeseen event. Everyone had to give their dividends to fight the pandemic. But now that the pandemic is over, we're back to normal business of increasing your capitalization, because as early as 2016, we were made to understand there is an urgent need to strengthen the BSP because our economy has expanded 11.3 times over. You know? And the BSP's capitalization has not been touched for 23 years. You know? So why the change in
Your
June?
Honor, tama po yung mga arguments. Actually, meron akong mga figures na tinitignan dito. Magmula noong 1993 hanggang 2017, ang in nominal terms, nominal kasi peso ang pinag-usapan, yung ekonomiya ay lumago ng 9.7 times. At actually, yung kapitalisasyon nanatili sa 50 billion lamang. Magmula ng 2017 hanggang 2021, lumago pa ulit ang economy, 1.2 times. So dun ina-underscore nun yung importansya ng pagtaas ng kapitalisasyon ng BSP at nananatili po yun. Pero yung ano namin, yung punto ngayon, yung bill naman, ang binibigay ay yung unang 2 taon, 100% nung dividendo na i-remit ng BSP mapupunta doon sa Maharlika Investment Fund. So delay po yun ng 2 years, tapos noon hati yung dividendo hanggang sa mapuno yung kapitalisasyon ng BSP. Yung balance sheet ho naman ng BSP nag-improve na in the meantime. Kaya ang assessment ay kayang i-accommodate yung delay ng kapitalisasyon. Ngayon, yun hong sinahit naman na figure, I think na-explain ko na rin kanina kung bakit bumaba yung net worth ng BSP between 2019 and 2022. Yung net worth ho kasi assets minus liabilities. Pag tinignan ho natin yung liabilities, yung currency issued lumago from 1.6 about 1.7 trillion pesos noong 2019. Ngayon yung preliminary October figure ng currency ay mga higit na sa 2 trillion pesos, almost 2.1 trillion. Unaudited pa ho yun. Ang importante ho yung currency, treated siya as liability nung BSP, pero hindi to katulad ng liability ng ibang korporasyon na kailangan mong bayaran.
Deputy Governor, hindi ho yan yung sinabi niyo sa amin noong 2016. Yung sinasabi niyo ho ngayon, ang layo ho. And I'll read the transcript sa Technical Working Group in 2016. This was from Deputy Governor Aquino. No?
I think baka Ginigundo ho?
Vicente
Vicente Aquino. Ayun.
Babasahin ko ho sa inyo. Ito ho yung transcript. Of course, the first major proposed amendment to the Bangko Sentral Charter is the increased capitalization from 50 to 200 billion.
Yes.
So a proposed increase of by 150 billion. Mr. Chairman, the compelling justification for this proposed major amendment is that a full and increased capitalization of 150 billion for the Bangko Sentral will ensure financial strength of the nation's Central Monetary Authority, which is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. There is no gainsaying that the scale and complexity of the Bangko Central's responsibilities has been magnified by the growth of the Philippine economy and the rapid expansion of the Philippine financial system. And it goes on. Based on the available accurate statistical data, our economy in real terms as of December 2015 was 11.3 times bigger, or has grown by a factor of 11.3 times since 1993, from 1.3 trillion in 1993 to 15 trillion as of end of 2015. The rapid phase of growth of the size of the banking system is actually even higher at 12.2 times the total banking resources existing as of 1993 or 1993. And the size of the balance sheet of the central bank has grown more than eightfold since the creation in 1993. The assets have also risen from a measly 518 billion in 1993 to 4.3 trillion as of 2015. The total liabilities have similarly ballooned from 502 billion 20 years ago to 4.2 trillion as of end of December 2015. Ito po yung emphasis. The Bangko Sentral as a central monetary authority has been lagging behind its peers not only in the region but also in other parts of the world. And as the nation's only central monetary authority, the BSP needs a larger or bigger capitalization to enable it to meet the growing needs of the expanding economy and the growing complexity and sophistication of our financial system. Despite all this, the authorized capitalization of the BSP remained at 50 billion, which have taken more than 20 years to be fully subscribed or paid. So, if you read the transcript, there's a sense of urgency at the time, 2016. No? And ngayon ho,
Well,
2 years mawawala yung dividendo ho ninyo. 2 years hindi ho yan pupunta sa capitalization ho ninyo. Nasaan na ho yung sense of urgency?
Balido lahat yung yung lahat ng arguments na yon nandun pa rin ho. Yung sinayit ko lang, yung sinayit doon kanina na size ng economy, total resources of the financial system actually between 93 to 2017 lumago ng 14.5 times. Yung kanina hong na-cite ko ay yung nominal GDP. So merong mga...
But that's not the point. The point, Deputy Governor, in 2016, when you were arguing to increase your capitalization to 200 billion, I read it carefully. No?
Yes.
you wanted a strong BSP
Strong
to adapt to
BSP.
the changing times because as
Yes.
the economy has grown.
Yes.
Now that we're almost back to normal, why are you foregoing 2 years of your capitalization, of your dividends that will go to your capitalization?
Yung nung time hong yon, meron mga taon na nagkakaroon ng net loss ang BSP. Ngayon ho mga huling taon, malaki naman ang ating mga
Pwede na ba ang sabihin na hindi nyo na kailangan itaas yung inyong capitalization? Let's
Kailangan
amend the
pa
law
ho.
again and go back. Tanggalin na natin yung 200 billion.
Kailangan pa ho. Kaya nga ho yung ano dito, after 2 years, babalik ulit 50%
How much is that 2 years in projection nyo for 2 years?
ng
Dividends na nawala.
well, wala hong, mahirap hong magbigay ng projection, pero ang
Practically, it's about
nakikita
20
ko,
billion a year.
Noong 2020, ang dividends ay 40.5 billion pesos. 2021, 16.35 at 2022, 17.41.
On the average, mawawala sa inyo mga 20 billion a year. So that's about 40 billion in 2 years.
Mga ganun ho, for 2 years. And then, after that, doon naman papasok ulit yung mga...
No, I think I subscribe to the arguments of Mr. Chikiamco that the source is problematic because on one hand, you're saying that you need to strengthen the regulator. On the other hand, hindi nyo ginagawa yun, you're willing to forgo. So, how do we now, when you come back here and ask to increase your capital, how do we trust you?
Yung lahat nung arguments kanina, valid pa rin ho. Kaya gusto rin ng BSP na may increase ang kanyang kapitalisasyon. Ngayon, ang sinabi ho naman namin kanina, yung may mandate na mag-remit ang BSP ng portion ng kanyang dividendo sa national government, and yung dividendong yon ay pag-aari ng national government. So nasa ano ho yun? Nasa ating mga mambabatas.
Pero kung ganun ho yung argument, nasa
nasa
batas rin ho na dapat in dividendo ilagay ho sa BSP. It's in the law, provided that the increase in capitalization shall be funded solely from the declared dividends of the Bangko Sentral in favor of the government. For the purpose, any and all declared dividends of the Bangko Sentral in favor of the national government shall be deposited in a special account in general fund and earmarked for the payment of the Bangko Central's increase in capitalization. Yes. That is the intention ho.
Ang assessment ho ngayon kasi nagkaroon na naman ng improvement sa balance
But I
sheet
don't
ng
see the
BSP.
improvement. The capitalization is still 60 billion. The target is 200 billion. So where's the improvement there?
If I can, sige, yung surplus.
My point,
ang ating
not to
control.
belabor the hearing, Mr. Chair, we really need to review the mandates, no? Because in the charter, it's very clear that we need to increase the capitalization. We will all made to understand there's a sense of urgency because we need a strong regulator. But now we're foregoing that. We voted for that bill. Kasama ho kami na bumoto doon. If we vote to forgo the 2 years in favor of Maharlika, in effect contradicting our vote during those times. That's where I'm coming from ho. So not to belabor, Mr. Chair, but I just want to stress that point because there's really some problem. I think there's some issue in the source of the fund.
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that, making that very important point. Is there any other questions? Please
Mr. Chairman,
proceed,
siguro just
Senator Binay.
for clarification, medyo nalito lang ako. Deputy Governor, kailangan niyo pa ho ba yung 200 billion o hindi na?
Kailangan po.
So, yun pa rin yung goal nyo
Yun
is
pa
to
rin ang
reach that
goal.
200 billion.
Yes.
And what's your plan on how to reach that 200 billion?
Um,
Considering na nagkaroon ng Maharlika.
Pag dito ho sa version ng Maharlika ngayon, after the 2-year period, yung dividendo na ibibigay ng BSP sa national government, kalahati ho nun ay mapupunta sa BSP ulit at gagawing pagtaas ng kanyang kapitalisasyon hanggang sa mapuno yung 200 billion.
So with this bill, meron na ho ba kayong projection na without Maharlika, ilang years nyo marireach yung 200 billion? And with Maharlika, ilang years nyo ngayon marireach yung 200 billion?
Well, Your Honor, kasi mahirap po talagang gumawa ng projection ganon sapagkat nagbabago yung takbo ng ekonomiya. Pero yung sinabi ko kanina, yung mga dividendo na historical, naglalaro sa between 40 hanggang 20 billion
Siguro,
pesos
can
a
you just
year.
make a projection dun sa, based on the previous dividends? Kasi mako-compute nyo naman kung ilang years yung mawawala dun sa pag-achieve nyo ng 200 billion because you need to give yung 50% of your dividends to Maharlika Fund. Diba?
Ang maaari hong gawin dito kung ibase na lang namin doon sa historical tapos maggawa kami ng senaryo.
Sige po, can you submit that to the
Gawin
committee?
po namin.
O kasi katulad nga nung ni-raise ni Senator Gatchalian, we passed this bill kasi nga may sense of urgency for you to increase your capitalization. But if we pass yung Maharlika, hindi namin kayo tinutulungan ma-achieve yung goal na yon kasi binawasan namin kayo ng 50% dun sa capitalization nyo. Tama po ba?
Magkakaroon ng mas mahabang time period bago ma-achieve yung 200
Gaano kahaba ho
billion.
ba yung nakikita nyo?
Mga 14 from our controller, mga 14 years para mabuo as opposed to mga kalahati noon. Pero rough pa lang ho yun. I-refine pa namin yung
And ano ho yung implication nung that 7 years na mawawala sa inyo? I'm sure may implication ho yan. And what is that? Kasi kailangan ho namin makita yung cost-benefit eh. I mean, di ba, if we pass this bill, ano yung, mas malaki ba yung benefit for BSP compared to us giving you the 100% dividends for your capitalization? So, kailangan ho namin ng ganong support.
Siguro we can ask the BSP to submit a paper
we'll submit
answering that.
Just to finish off, I think it's important to, we're also, as senators, we're also risk averse. And it's important for the DOF to help us minimize or mitigate that risk by understanding fully not only the source of the fund, but where the fund will be going. I'm sure there's some form of investment strategy that was thought of, and where the money will be invested in and what type of returns will be realized. So those things should be discussed thoroughly because those are risky. Parang it's what's happening right now. We're putting funds, but we don't know where it's going. Parang bahala na where it's going. We know it's developmental. We know it's some form of return, but we don't know what. And that's where I think most of us are coming from. So we need to understand that fully, and hopefully in the next hearing, Mr. Chair, we can discuss that in greater detail.